Hey guys, Mike from Shimino's Workshop. On this tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to wire a 2.1 recharge port. I've already done a little bit of pre-work here. I've cut the wires that I'm going to use to size. I have the chassis that I'm going to use on the install. I've removed the washer and the nuts. I have a pair of scissors. I have a pair of needle nose pliers, a pair of wire strips, some Loctite blue, and a file, a rounded file. So the first thing I do when I design a chassis and print it, I don't make the holes too big. I'd rather the holes be small and I sand than the holes be too big. So I'm just doing a fit, and sometimes the hole's the right size, right dimension, but you know, sometimes maybe I can zoom in now. Sometimes the supports or just the filament from the 3D printer, or your printer doesn't actually print it in the dimension that it was designed in. So I just use a file and I open that hole just a little bit more. And I do a test fit. I don't want this to screw into the plastic. I actually just want it to be able to go all the way in, because I'm going to use the nut to secure it. So I want it to be able, you know, I want it to go in smoothly. Maybe I'll go a little bit more. Okay. Now, you know, it's popular in this style of chassis setup. You have the access port in the back that allows us to insert the recharge port from the back. And now you can see those are too big, right? We don't want those that big, the soldering tabs. So we're going to cut those, but that's our fit, right? So we would be putting it in from that side. I don't use the washer. We put the nut in, we would put the nut on, and then we would tighten it down. And that's where the Loctite comes in. I'll put a little bit of blue Loctite on those threads. Right, blue Loctite on the threads, and then put the nut on. This way I don't have to worry about over tightening the nut, stripping it, you know, trying to get a pair of pliers to hold the bottom as I try to tighten the top. I'm going to let the Loctite do its job and hold that nut in place, and ensure that over time, through the vibration of the speaker, that the nut isn't going to come undone. So that's where the Loctite comes in. I also have a pair of snips, wire cutters. So I use these and I cut back the tabs on the recharge port quite a bit. If you look on the tab, right, it has the hole in the tab. I'm pretty much cutting it to the top of that tab. You might want to close your eyes as you do it, because they have a tendency to fly around the room, and you don't want it to fly into your eye. And then what I'm going to do is, now that it's snipped, I'm going to put it back in, and I'm checking for clearance. So one of them sitting a little bit higher than I want it to sit, so I'm going to snip that one back just a little more. Again, I find that as long as I snip it above the hole, then that's usually a good point. So we can check fit again. Okay, so we want clearance. So that's good. Now I have different color 22 gauge wire. As we can see, I have gray, I'm using purple, and I'm using brown. Doesn't matter color, as long as you remember the color, that's the important thing. I just happen to buy multicolored in batches, so I'm going to use up the color that I have. And I think I have a diagram printed. We'll thank Goth for this one, Rick. A lot of his instructions show this, so this is good, right? If we take our recharge port and hold it, so we orient with this piece right here, face up, and that tells us that positive is on the right, battery negative is on the bottom, see, and board negative is on the left. Okay, so it's always nice to have those things, those diagrams printed and available for reference. And so what I'm going to do first, I'm again going to a little bit of flux on the 3 tabs, and then I'm going to put the recharge port in my helping hands. I can move the camera a little bit. Okay. Okay, we got focus. So I have my soldering iron, my station set up to 700 degrees, and I'm tinning the tip of my soldering iron and just applying little heat and solder to each of those tabs. You do one, turn it. Now we're only doing the 3 bottom tabs. We are not touching this tab, right? We're not touching. Oh, you know what? Let's look at the diagram. Okay. We're not doing anything to this. Don't touch it, don't solder it, don't put a wire on it, don't put flux on it. We're only doing the 3 tabs. Okay, so we will turn that one. Now definitely, definitely don't apply too much heat. You don't want to damage the recharge port. But I got good tin on that. And so the way that I do this, so you know, we're going to have our battery, which has a positive and negative. We have our Profi board, which will sit in here, or CF10, but it doesn't matter. We'll have a board, soundboard, that's going to sit in there. That's going to get a negative line as well, bat negative, and also battery positive. So what I do is I take 2 22 gauge wires, and I'm going to solder them to the positive leg. Positive tab. One of them is going to go to bat positive wire directly to the battery, and the other one is going to go bat positive to the board. There's many ways you could do this. That's how I do it. So I'll take this extra wire and we'll put it off to the side, out of the way. Okay. Then I'm going to take another colored wire, and this is going to go to one of the negative pads. We'll say bat negative for gray. Gray will be bat negative. So we'll leave that there and put the other ones over to the side. And then brown will be board negative. Okay. And I am going to do bat positive first. So the first thing I do, using wire strippers, I'm going to strip a decent amount, quarter inch maybe. Okay. Get them close to the same size. Then I'm going to twist them together. My recharge port doesn't want to stay in my alligator clip. Okay. So I'm twisting the two positive wires together. Then I'm going to tin them so they stay together. Again, my wire is pre-tinned, but I'm tinning them so that they stay together, and so that there's also a little bit extra solder on them for when I solder it to the recharge port. Okay? Having this having the wire a little bit longer, that thing won't stay. Makes it easier to solder them together, but you don't want them that long when you're soldering it. So I tend to cut them back. See if I can adjust these a little bit. Not sure why they're not gripping today. I don't trust it. Okay. Zoom in. So now that my recharge port tabs are pre-tinned and my wires pre-tinned and cut back, I'm going to solder the wire to the tab. So I'm re-tinning my soldering iron tip, and this is going to take a good amount of heat. So I might turn up the heat on my soldering station here so that it can one thing I try to do is I heat up the tab and the solder first so that it's ready to accept, and then I'm applying heat 1, 2, 3, and I'm good. Okay, we'll clean up that, and then we'll rotate, and we can check, make sure it's on there, it's good. Visually inspect it. Looks okay to me. Okay, now the next one is battery negative. I think we said that was going to be the gray wire. Again, it doesn't matter as long as you remember which wire is which. Now there's only one wire, so there's nothing to join. I'm not joining two wires together, so the length of the strip doesn't really matter. I'm going to tin it, going to snip it, and then I'm going to attach it. Now this should go a lot easier. Good. Now that I see that positive on an angle, I'm going to hit that again. I don't think the heat transferred all the way through. Okay, much better. Good. Okay. Yep, much better. Okay, now we'll rotate to the last tab. strip our last wire. This is board negative. Okay, same thing. I'm going to tin it. Now this tab is much bigger than the other tabs. I don't know why it's designed that way. But you really don't have to, this one doesn't have to be snipped as much as the other ones do. You got a lot of room on this tab. You might as well use it, right? Okay. I'll turn off my soldering station since we're done. We should be done with that. Now again, I'm gonna visually inspect it, give it a little tug, make sure I'm happy with that. Now, I could, I use different. There's liquid tape, which, as the name suggests, it's liquid. I could put liquid tape all around that, but for this I use heat shrink. So I have a roll, I'm not sure how, if that's 1 inch, maybe a little bit bigger. I just cut off a little slice. Use my tweezer to open it up because it's kind of sticky on the inside. And the idea here is just to protect the metal contacts, so I can actually cut this back a good amount. So just enough that it's covering the metal, because the metal, it's going to be exposed down here. So I'm not worried necessarily about this tab. I'm worried about the soldering points. And then I have my heat gun. I use a heat gun. People use lighters. People use the iron. I use an air gun, a heat gun. Although in this case, there we go. A little more heat. Probably cut that a little bit too short. Shorter than I would like. But that's okay. Again, the goal is we're covering the solder tabs. Okay. And now I'm putting the recharge port in. And now my wires are going to run in this direction. So I'm facing, the 3 wires are sort of oriented towards the back where the speaker would go, facing this way. This way I can pull them in and they'll lay flat and not interfere with the chassis, with the saber hilt. So before I do that, though, I'm going to get a little bit of blue Loctite. Going to get my nut. And so all I'm doing is just a small little dab. That's all you need. You don't need much. Okay. You see that? Just a little bit on the threads. Try not to get it inside the recharge port. Okay. And then I can kind of hold it with my finger in the back as I tighten the nut down a little bit. Again, you don't have to go crazy with this. The Loctite will do its job once it's dry. Okay. Just a little bit of Loctite, and then we can clean it up. And that's gonna hold nice. Okay. And you can throw a kill key in there now if you wanted to. Doesn't matter. There's no power in there. But you're going to be putting a battery in, at least I do as my next step. And then wiring it so that I can test the recharge port, test that I'm getting the proper voltage going through. And so I don't forget, I put a kill key in now while I remember. And now I'm going to feed my wires through the hole into where the soundboard will be. So I'm going to do that with all 4 wires. You know, and depending on how clean or how well you cut the heat shrink, you might have to go in there with maybe a knife or scissor and trim it down. So, you know, some of these things you just kind of have to learn to react to the situation. Okay, but that's what you're looking for. You want the wires to be lie flat so that they are not going to touch any part of the hilt. You don't want them rubbing on anything metal or sharp. This wire is good wire. It's PTFE wire. The shielding is real nice, so I'm not concerned. But not everybody uses this wire, so you just want to make sure. Could you put something over that? You know, again, maybe I could put a little bit of liquid tape. You know, you do what you got to do to make sure that those wires are, you know, in no danger of getting coming in contact with some other piece of metal. And so that's it. They'll stay there. So can I test this recharge port now? I certainly can try. Test a little bit of it. Okay, so we know the power wire, the battery, let's see. So the idea is if I plug in my charger now to the recharge port and I test positive and the 2 negatives, then I should get voltage across the battery positive and 1 of the negatives, the bat negative, not the board negative. So I can test that now. So I'm going to strip back just one. You don't have to do both. They're connected. So I'll strip battery positive, I'll strip board negative, I believe that was, and bat negative. Okay. I'll connect my positive with my alligator clip, and I'll connect the negative to, we'll go bat negative first, which I believe is my gray one. I'll turn on voltage, change it to DC, take my kill key out, plug in, and I got 4.25 volts, which is what my charger feeds. Okay, now if I take it out, obviously that drops. And now what we want to test is that the board negative is not getting any power when the recharge port is plugged in. I plug that in, just floating, right? Oh shoot, you can't even see it, sorry. There's my multimeter. Okay, let's put that over here. Okay, so I have bat positive connected, I have board negative connected, and I'm a recharge cable in, and I'm getting just like a floating voltage there. So that's good. Now if I take and I switch it back to bat negative, because I don't think this was on camera, I'm getting 4.25 volts. So I know I hooked up the recharge port properly. And I know I'm getting the right amount of voltage. So we can disconnect the tester. Okay. Now, like I said, I have a tendency, I put the kill key back in because I don't want to forget. And I also have a tendency to snip the wire. I don't want any exposed metal, because the next part is going to be hooking up the battery. I'm going to put the battery in here. I'm going to connect positive to one of these. And then the other is going to go, the other would stay board positive, and then I can connect negative to negative. And then I can test that the recharge port is charging the battery. Just by looking at the charge adapter and making sure that the light turns red. But I might do the battery. Maybe I'll do the speaker, and then put this inside of the hilt, because the thing that, so the way that I do this, sorry, I don't want to confuse you guys, but I have my two positives. One of the positives will join. One of the positives goes right to the board. He goes alone, along with board negative. So this is my board positive and board negative. Okay, we can wrap those over there and get them out of the way. That leaves battery negative. That'll go right directly to bat negative. And then this is going to go to both battery positive and NeoPixel connector positive. So what I do is I take battery positive and join it to NeoPixel positive, solder those two wires together, and then once they're joined, solder them to the battery positive leg. And then I can shove that down there. My bat negative, I can shove that down there. They're out of the way. Won't need to deal with those wires again. And then I just have to deal with bat negative, positive negative, bat positive, bat negative, or board positive, really, right? So my positive and negative lines going from recharge port to board pads. I forgot that was a magnet. Should probably get that out of here. Okay, so hope that was helpful. I'll do these next off camera, and do my next recording. Probably, yeah, maybe I'll do the speaker next. Okay.